Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sharon Mitchell with the Spring Hill Chamber of Commerce, and I would like to welcome you to this event, which is being conducted on behalf of the Johnson County Public Policy Council. The Johnson County Public Policy Council is made up of the Johnson County Chambers of Commerce and the Kansas City Chamber, and jointly we host a website, votejoco.com. It's a nonpartisan site where voters can learn about candidates running for public office. So I have with me here today Representative Adam Thomas and Dr. Mike Shimeall, and they are candidates running for the Kansas District 26, Kansas House of Representatives District 26. And this district covers parts of Johnson and Miami counties, including all of Spring Hill and parts of Olathe. So thank you to the two of you for joining us today. Kind of how the format's gonna go on this, we will have one candidate at a time give a brief opening statement, and then we will ask about 4 questions, and then we will allow them to have any closing remarks, and then we'll bring the other candidate on and do the same for them. We are not going to be doing any public question and answer in this session, but we will try to do our best to provide you with information on how to contact the candidates individually so that you can ask them any questions that you may have. So without any further ado, I guess Representative Thomas drew the short straw and he's going to go first. So we will go ahead and start with him. And there you go, got the video turned off with Dr. Shimeall. And Representative Thomas, you can go ahead and begin with your opening statement. I think that the conversation is really just for you to tell us a little bit more of why you're running for re-election.
Well, thank you, Sharon. First of all, if you don't know Sharon Mitchell, this lady works harder than just about anybody, especially in this chamber. She's done great work. She puts all this together. And I, for one, truly appreciate what you do. I also want to thank my wife and my family. You know, when you run for public office, it's not just the candidate, but there's a team behind them. There needs to be that level of support there. And I have probably the best support you could possibly think of. My wife, Kristen, my five beautiful children who are enjoying their Zoom learning right now, 2 of them. But it takes a team, and I'm super proud of my family and the way they stuck with me. It means a lot. So that being said, I have thoroughly enjoyed it as being your representative for District 26. It has been a humbling experience. It's taught me a lot. I've gotten to know some great friends, both in Topeka and here in Spring Hill, and I'm super thankful for that as well. First and foremost, I want to talk about my responsibilities as a legislator. You have to be available to the people. I spend a lot of time getting emails from folks on both sides of the aisle. You have to be willing to answer those emails and take those calls. You represent the people. You're hired to do a civic duty, and it is responsible to answer those people. And I thoroughly enjoyed my conversations with those people. Some of the best conversations I've had are with people who don't agree with me, because we always try to find a way to end on a point where we find some common ground. And I think that's very, very important. And at the end of the day, we answer to the people that hired us. We answer to the people that put us in our place, not to our political party, not to leadership in Topeka. We answer to the people. And I think that gets sort of lost in translation at times. So I wanted to make sure you understand that so long as I am in that office, I will answer to the people, not to party leadership. And you also have to be strong enough to do what's right, no matter what you're being told, either by party or by the pressures that you receive from lobbyists or anyone else for that matter. So it does take thick skin. It has been exciting. It has been fun at times. It's been difficult at times. And as we move forward, you need those common sense solutions. You need a strong, steady hand to help at the helm to drive the state forward. And I believe I will continue to do that and be a part of the legislative process going forward to make sure we stay on track as Kansas. Thank you.
Thank you for that. The first question, what would be your top 3 priorities as if you return to office?
Economic growth post-COVID-19 has to be at the top of the ticket. We face budget shortfall. We face small business owners that are struggling to get by. Some have closed down, some are close. And we have to make sure we do whatever we can to help those people. We also need to talk about education. One of the things we worked on in the K through 12 budget committee was a bill that would have adjusted the capital state aid formula. It was House Bill 2526. I worked with Dr. Burke specifically on that bill, and it would have saved Spring Hill about $7 million over time, coming out of the district back to the state, paying off those bonds. So items like that will be first and foremost on my list when we go back to make sure that that money stays in Spring Hill versus being sent back to Topeka, where it gets filtered through the legislative process, down through the Board of Education, down through the school boards. That's money that just stays locally, that doesn't get spent by legislators and doesn't go through that filtration process. That money needs to definitely stay here. And also just focusing on property taxes. You know, I've been knocking doors for weeks and months now, and people are concerned. Property taxes go up, sometimes without warning, up double digits. And if you're on a fixed income, if you're a senior living on Social Security, it's very difficult to make that adjustment. And you got some tough decisions to make. And I feel like the tough decisions need to be made at the top in Topeka through the legislative process, not made by those whose actions are most affected, whose lifestyles are most affected by what we do.
The second question is, how would you propose to balance the state budget, and what specific budget cuts would you support, and what revenue enhancements would you consider, if any?
Well, what I want to talk about is a couple of things. We need to look at the revenue streams before we just start cutting. I know one of the things that was first brought out was a $22 million cut to the Intellectual and Disability Program, the IDD program, the largest state cut in history. I will oppose that, and I will make sure that money gets back. We need to talk first about revenue streams and revenue estimates. There's a couple of controversial issues that we talked about in Fed and State near the end of the session that didn't see the light of day, one being medical marijuana, one being sports betting. And I know that some people have mixed feelings about those. When you look at the revenue streams from those two things, we're talking in upwards of over $100 million a year. So rather than talk first about cuts, I would at least consider those two options so we can look at revenue streams. And when we get those revenue streams back, then we have less we have to cut, and then we can have that conversation. And I'm looking forward to meeting with the governor and her team and also fellow legislators to talk about how we're going to do that. But I think you have to start with revenue streams and revenue increases before talking about, excuse me, taxes on the individuals.
Okay. Third question, and this is the third of four. Can you share with us your views on K-12 funding? You kind of alluded to it a little bit in your opening, but you may want to expand just a little bit on that.
Yes, I sat on the K through 12 budget committee. I went through all of the hearings and all of the budget battles that we had. And one thing I noticed, the common theme that was left out of those talks and those negotiations was the children. We focused on teachers, which is great. I think teachers are saints, in my opinion. I know being at home with 4 children that need to be taught essentially homeschool with a 2-year-old running around, it is difficult. So I can't imagine what they go through. But when you talk to the teachers, when you talk to them first about plans, we had a bill that would allow $500 to come out per classroom from the state general fund, not from education, to go directly to the teachers for supplies. So they didn't have to spend their own hard-earned money to get those supplies. And that was opposed and voted down. And we were told, well, you should just vote to give teachers pay increases. Problem with that is when we vote on allocations and pay increases, that money gets filtered through the process of the state Board of Education, the Board of Regents, the local school boards, and it's up to them to decide where that money goes. So what we were attempting to do is give money directly to the classrooms. And so with that failing, we've got to get back to talking about the children and focusing our efforts and our resources on starting with funding the classrooms, not starting with funding the top first. And that's something I will continue to fight for. That's something I've spent a lot of time talking to Dr. Burke in Spring Hill about, some time with John Ellison and Olathe talking about. And the bill we proposed about capital state aid got unanimous support from the superintendents, passed out of committee unanimously, and with 0 opposition. And so it didn't get to hit the floor this year because we had to shut down early. But that's one of the first things I'm going to press for. And that was a bill the superintendents, like I said, all got behind. Teachers were supportive of it, and it passed out of committee unanimously. So I think that's where we start, is we start with the classroom first and then work our way up.
Okay. The last question here for Representative Thomas is, what are your views on healthcare policy and Medicaid expansion in Kansas?
Well, Medicaid expansion in its current form, I opposed. We voted on it. We had a nurse assistant bill that we were working on. It got gutted, replaced with Medicaid expansion. And when it was ruled not germane, the chair of the Rules Committee was overturned. So I voted no on that. I think it needs to go through a process, and I think it should have. We went through that process and we talked about it. And the issues I have with Medicaid expansion are, in 2019, we had 3,700 seniors that were on the waiting list to get it and hadn't gotten it yet. They discussed the Health Institute had a stat that said 55,000 people would stop paying their insurance premiums and get on Medicaid. So where does that bill end up going? First of all, we didn't have a set amount. It started at 18 million, went up to 48 million. Now we don't have a final number from the governor's office. So we need that first. But that's going to fall on the backs of the taxpayers. And what I won't support is a tax increase to cover Medicaid expansion. What I won't support is businesses like my friend Matt, who has a t-shirt business, having to fork over more of his dollars to cover the cost of Medicaid expansion. The other thing that we discussed that opposition opposed was work requirements. We're not asking for much. We want people to be out there looking for work. We don't want people living off the Medicaid system. The people that need it deserve it, and the people that have it now need to keep it. But what we don't want to do is increase the number of people dependent on government, which we all know government is funded by the taxpayers. And so I struggle with that. There was a story about a hospital in Fort Scott that got shut down, and they blamed it on Medicaid expansion not passing. That hospital, the last 2 years it was open, lost $28 million. And the estimated revenues for Medicaid expansion were about $2.5 million. So that hospital would not have survived even with Medicaid expansion. There are Medicare hospitals in Kansas that are literally seeing, and this is multiple hospitals, seeing 0 to 3 patients a day. Medicaid expansion in its current form will not help that, and I will oppose it. We need to go back to the drawing board on this, and we need a better solution than what we had on the table this last year.
That is the 4 questions that I have. I would like you, Representative Thomas, to please tell us how we can reach you, all the ways you would like to be reached or that we could reach you. And then if you have any final closing thoughts, if you could share those with us, please.
Well, you can email me at adamt.thomas@yahoo.com. You can call, text, whatever you want to do. My cell phone is 615-624-2991. So I'm available. There's a lot of folks that have reached out via text, via email, and I reply to every one of you if you live in the district. So I want to talk a little bit about integrity, the quality of being honest. I had many conversations with folks. I'm going to start with the firefighters. They came to me with an issue, and all they wanted was to be heard. And I told them, we were talking about a cost of living adjustment. I said, if the funding mechanism is there and the timing is right, I'll support it. But in politics, you know how it gets. Well, we had a bill come up, and I took some heat for this one. And I voted for the cost of living increase because there was a funding mechanism. So we talk about integrity, we talk about honesty. I've proven that time and time again. House Bill 2016, it was language agreed to by the governor and leadership. We came into caucus, they said this has all been agreed to with no amendments. Well, guess what? I wasn't in those meetings, so I didn't agree to that. So Representative Jeff Pittman had a great amendment that came up, a Democrat, about workers' comp for 2 prison care workers who lost their lives, corrections facility guys. It was a good amendment. I voted for it. And they asked me, hey, why are you supporting this? And I said, because I am a servant of the people. I don't serve my party, I serve the people, and I will continue to do so. So I am looking forward to going back to Topeka and serving as a state representative for District 26 again for 2 more years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. We did have a couple of people join in between after we gave the announcements. So Just to kind of tell you how the format of this is going to go and where you can go to watch the entire video. The video will be posted on votejoco.com, and it should be within probably a couple of days that we'll get that video up. What we have been doing here is we had Representative Thomas on first. He gave an opening statement why he's running for re-election, and then answered 4 kind of policy questions, and then gave a closing statement and how we could reach him. So now we will do the same for our second candidate here, the challenger in the race, Dr. Michael Shimeall. Is that how you say your last name? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right.
Good. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and allow you to give your opening statement, and then we'll do some questions in the same format.
Well, thank you, Sharon. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this, and also promoting it later on the online. My name, as Sharon said, is Michael Shimeall, and I'm a retired school educator, and with 45 years in education as a teacher, as a school administrator, and as a university professor. And I'm running for the same reason that I went into education, is that it has to do with education, that I want to promote and help world-class school for all students, regardless of who they are, who their parents are, or where they live across the state. I am a born Kansan. My career has been in both Kansas and Nebraska. And my wife and I have lived in the district for over a decade. The issues that I believe are important, I know, Sharon, you're going to get into this. First of all, it has to do with education. I want to promote education. I want to guarantee that it's continued to be supported. And in order to do that, we have to support the decision of the Supreme Court and not try to overturn what the Supreme Court has done. My wife and I have 2 grown children. Our son is a medical doctor in the Navy, and our daughter lives in Olathe. And we moved here to be closer to 4 of our 8 grandchildren that have gone through the school system here in Olathe. This is an important race for me. I'm running because I see the rules in the legislature as basically corrupt. It puts too much power in the hands of the leadership, who then can dictate who serves on committees, who the chair people are, what bills come up. I believe that the chair people of the committees should be elected and chosen by the committees. And I know that being in the minority, I might not have a voice in that. But I believe that democracy is important. For my career in education, I taught about government. At the university level, I taught about constitutional law. And it is important that we all, as citizens, become involved. And one of the reasons I am running is that I want to give the voters of the District 26 a choice. And only by being a candidate on both parties can we have that. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome. Thanks for that opening statement. And if the next one is that this is the same list of questions as we gave to Representative Thomas. So if you touched on some of this in your opening, you can just expand or move on. But what do you see as your top 3 priorities if you're elected?
I think the overriding factor right now for the state of Kansas is the pandemic. And one thing that it has done, it has laid bare the inequity between rural and urban Kansas. We need to deal with that first. We cannot go back to our schools in a safe manner until that is dealt with. And I support the governor's effort. You know, the president reneged on the federal level on the effort, and he farmed it off to the states. And I support the governor's effort because we need leadership, and she has provided that for us in this area. I regret the fact that issues have become political. It's been politicized, down to the level of how we're conducting our schools. From my standpoint, when I taught school law and worked with prospective principals and superintendents, when we talked about closing schools, I always told them that you always err on the side of safety. And of course, we were talking about snow days. Now we're talking about a bigger, much larger crisis. And it bothers me that sometimes, you know, there's no clear answer at the point and we get two sides. We develop into a binary decision on it. And we begin to fight each other rather than to fight the cause of it, which is the pandemic. So everything stems around that. And it also laid bare the fact that we needed to work on the infrastructure of which will help districts across the state, and will help rural health care, and will help people that are running their businesses from home if they have good broadband work. And when my last superintendency in Nebraska, I also chaired a 25 district consortium where we brought broadband to all those districts, and were able to expand the learning opportunities for students. This needs to be done not only for education in Kansas, but across the state. Second area really is that I am a strong supporter in expanding Medicaid and CanCare. I believe that it is an economic boom to the state. I believe in the words of Paul Wellstone when he said, "We all do better when we all do better." And I believe that healthcare is a human right, and it should not be denied to people for political reasons. So education tied to the pandemic, the expansion of Medicaid, or Medicare, excuse me, and the infrastructure within the state, which is tied to all of that, would probably be the three top items that I believe in.
Thank you. The second question is, how would you propose to balance the state budget, and what specific budget cuts would you support, and what revenue enhancements would you consider?
I think when the Brownback experiment took place, they called it a tax cut, but it was not. It was a tax shift to the middle class. That is where the property taxes was the cause for the rise of that. Education, local government had to be funded. And the state, by cutting those funds, shifted it back to the property tax. I believe that historically that in our state, it's been a three-legged stool with sales tax, property tax, and the income tax. And I believe that we need to balance that once again. We need to look at some of those corporate tax rates. We need to look at where those cuts were made, or those changes in the tax structure were made, and see what we can do, continue to do to balance that system back. Property tax is high, but it's high because it was shifted to the property tax. Sales tax in Kansas, particularly in this area of the state, is one of the highest in the nation. I believe that we should look at the sales tax on food, for instance. That is a regressive tax. It hurts the middle class and the lower class the most. And as far as further cuts, I don't know where you're going to do that. I believe that we're going to have to look at the entire structure, but when I was at the university, there were colleagues who, due to that Brownback fiasco, had not received a raise in the 6-year period. There was a shift there to students and to the tuition, and it went up, it quadrupled during that period of time just to keep the college open and to allow for students to prepare for their lifetime. Thank you.
Okay, the next question, and you've kind of touched on this through some of your other questions that you've answered, but can you share with us your views on K-12 education funding?
I think first and foremost, we have to guarantee that it's going to continue, and that we need to, I've dealt with school budgets as a superintendent, and I've dealt with when the state has cut the money coming through the districts and trying to still maintain a quality education for the students. We're in education to prepare people for their lifetime and for their future. Education is an investment in the future of Kansas, and we need to protect that and to enhance it in any way that we can. Teachers are the core of education. They make the whole system work. When I was at Emporia State, did a study on loss of teachers in Kansas. There's a high percentage that were leaving the profession within 3 years. As we interviewed over 500 teachers that were leaving, why was it? And in Kansas, they were either leaving the state or they were leaving the profession altogether. And the part of it had to do with their compensation in being a teacher, but more than that, it was being honored as a teacher. And when the state took away the right of fair and due process and put it back on the districts, and many of those districts, it was no longer there. That was a disrespect to teachers. I've served for over 30 years as a volunteer with advanced ed and with the state and regional accreditation, serving as a team leader, external team leader within schools. And I can guarantee you that the quality of education and teachers in the state of Kansas and the 3 other states that I worked in is great. And we need to honor those people.
Okay, thank you. The fourth and final question here is, you've touched on this as well a little bit, but if you'd like to expand, feel free. What are your views on healthcare policy and Medicaid expansion in Kansas?
As I said, I'm in favor of Medicaid expansion. I think it will enhance the state. Kansas is an island. Every other state around us has adopted Medicaid expansion, and it has worked in each one of those states. It is false to say that it's going to be back on the taxpayers within the very process of Medicaid expansion. If it goes away, if the Medicaid goes away from the federal government, then it goes away in the state. As I said, have a son that is a medical doctor in the Navy. He just returned to the States as the chief surgeon for the Marines in the Mideast. We have a daughter-in-law who teaches at the University of Maryland Medical School. I served as a medic with the 101st in Vietnam. Medical care is important to me. I became a medic because I wanted to save lives rather than take lives. And that's what I would like to pursue as a member of the legislature in Topeka, is continuing to work to help save lives of Kansans who work hard. The vast majority of people that would go on Medicaid expansion have jobs. They're the working poor. Many of them have 2, 3 jobs just to get through. The number that is needed for that is only going to increase because of the jobs that are being lost due to the pandemic. We need to support people, and we need to support the people in Kansas to have a better life, to have the promise that came with the state so many, many years ago.
Hey, thank you. That is all the questions I have for you. What I'd like to now is offer you a few minutes to just say anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to share with us, and then tell us how we can reach you, or how voters can reach you to ask some further questions.
Our website is Shimeall, Shimeall, and you can see in the back there, 4 Kansas. And you can contact me by email, which is mike@shimeallforkansas.com. And, or you can call me on my cell phone, which is 913-267-8759. I have, in walking through the district and talking to people, someone said, "Oh, you're an activist." I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or not. But as I thought of it, I thought, well, I'll take it as an activist. It started when I was in college, many, many years ago. And in 1965, some classmates and I went, we had a classmate from Selma, Alabama. We went with her down to her father's church to register people to vote who had been denied voting their entire life. Elections are essential. Promotion of elections. When recently the president of the state Senate commented that we need to gerrymander the districts. We need a supermajority in order to do that, gerrymander the districts. That is voter suppression, and that is wrong. If I'm an activist, it is because I believe that it is a right for everyone to have health care. I believe it is the right and the responsibility, a sacred right for everyone to be able to vote. And I believe that everyone, every student deserves a quality education. That is what I dedicated my life to. I want Kansas to be a better place. I'm trying to think of the year, but when I was 14 years old, in 1959, thank you, had to do some quick math there. In 1959, when I was 14 years old, I became an Eagle Scout. The thing that I enjoyed most or learned most from scouting had to do with camping. And it's the adage that you leave the campsite better when you left it than when you arrived. That has been a premise of my whole life. And each position I've had, I've worked to leave it in a better position, in a better place than when I arrived. And I want to be in the legislature to help Kansas be a better state for the future of our children and for my grandchildren, because they are extremely important to me.
Thank you. That concludes our event here today. Representative Thomas, if you're still there, you are welcome to turn your camera back on. I just have a few quick announcements. Just to let everybody know, the general election is on November 3rd, if you didn't know. The polls should be open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if you need help in this district finding out where you go and who to vote, you know, who your candidates are, all that kind of stuff, they're in Johnson County, it's jocoelection.org. In Miami County, it's miamicountyks.org/254/elections. Or you can just go to miamicountyks.org and click on elections. and you should be able to get all your information there. The last day to register to vote is today. Today is the last day to register to vote. Advanced voting by mail begins October 14th, which is tomorrow, and advanced voting in person begins October 19th. The last day to request an advanced ballot is October 27th at 5 p.m. And then the general election is on November 3rd. So best wishes to both of our candidates. One thing I will say is after speaking with both of these candidates, I think we have two candidates that truly care about our communities and have the best intentions in mind. So thank you. And I'd also like to thank the Johnson County Public Policy Council for kind of coordinating all of these efforts. And this forum today was also kind of hosted by the Olathe Chamber and the Gardner Chamber as well. So thank you, everyone. And I think everybody knows how they can reach the candidates. So the best wishes to everyone, and everybody have a great evening.
Thank you, Sharon.